Hi everyone! Today I'm gonna show you guys step by step how to crochet balaclava that is made from granny squares. It's a simple design that fits amazing and would be a great statement piece of your wardrobes this fall and winter. Alright, now let's get into the tutorial. So before we start the tutorial, I wanted to quickly show you guys materials that I will be using. First and foremost, I'm going to use this handy dandy 5.0mm crochet hook. The yarn I'm going to be using is milk cotton yarn in black and white color that is 80% milk cotton and 20% acrylic. And I'm going to use 2 strands of yarn for my 5mm crochet hook so that my balaclava would be thick and warm. Other than that, you will need darning needle to weave in your ends and scissors. For our future balaclava, we need to learn how to crochet these 2 types of granny squares. Regarding the size and the number of rows, they are exactly identical. The only difference is in the color. So in this square we start off with the white center, and with this square we start off with the black one. First I'm going to show you how to crochet this granny square, but instead of using the black and white yarn, I'm going to change the black one for the gray one. This is only for demonstration purposes because the black color is very hard to see on the screen. So to start off, I'm taking my gray yarn. You can take your black yarn or your color of choice and make a slip knot. Then I take my crochet hook and take my yarn like this. And here we have our slip knot. Then we have to make 4 chains. Take your hook, and here's our first chain stitch. You can see the little V here. Now we have to make 3 more chains. 1, 2, 3. Here we have our 4 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we have to find our first chain stitch and make a slip stitch with it. Insert your hook and pull through 2. Now we have a circle. Then chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Now when we pull out our circle, we can see the little hole here, or you can call it a loop, and we have to make 2 double crochets in this loop. So yarn over, insert the hook in this hole. Now we have 3 loops on our hook, pull through 2, and then pull through 2. Here we made our first double crochet stitch. Now we are going to make another one. So yarn over, insert your hook, take your yarn. Now we have 3 loops on our hook, pull through 2, and then pull through 2. Now we are going to make chain 2. 1, 2. After chain 2, we have to make 3 double crochets in the same loop. So yarn over, insert your hook. Now we have 3 loops, pull through 2, and then pull through 2. Yarn over, insert your hook, then pull through 2, pull through 2. Yarn over, insert your hook. Now we have 3, pull through 2, and then pull through 2. Now make chain 2. 1, 2. 3 double crochets is called cluster. So basically we've made 2 clusters, and after each of them we make 2 chains. We have to make 4 clusters. Now we've made 2 and made chain 2, and now we are making our 3rd cluster. So yarn over, insert your hook, and make your first double crochet. Here's my first double crochet, yarn over. I'm making the second one, yarn over, inserting my hook and making my third double crochet. Here's my third cluster. Now chain 2. Now we are going to make our final fourth cluster in the same loop. So yarn over, insert your hook, pull through, and then pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, making my second double crochet stitch. Here it is, and now I'm making my third. Pull through 2, and then pull through 2, and then chain 2, 1, and then 2. Now we are going to find our first cluster of the row, and we can see that we made 3 chain stitches. Here's the first one, the second, and the third one. Insert your hook into the third one and make a slip stitch with it. Here is my little V, it's the third stitch, and then I'm taking my yarn and I'm pulling through both loops. After that, I'm making chain 1 and then cut off your yarn. This is how our first row of granny squares should look like. For the second row, I'm going to take my white yarn and make a slip knot. Now I'm going to take my granny square and start off from this point. When we pull out, we can see this chain space. I'm going to yarn over and then insert my hook into this chain space. Now we have 3 loops, pull through 2, and then pull through 2. Now we are going to yarn over and insert into the same chain space. Here's our loop. Now we have 3 loops, pull through 2, and then pull through 2. Now we are going to make our third double crochet. Yarn over, pull through 2, and then pull through 2. Now chain 1. Now we're going to make the next 3 double crochets or our next cluster in this space. So yarn over, insert your hook and make your first double crochet. Pull through 2, pull through 2. Yarn over, now make your third double crochet stitch, pull through 2, pull through 2. So here we made our cluster. After that we make chain 2. Now we are going to make one more cluster in the same space. So yarn over and insert your hook in the same loop, pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, make more 2 double crochet. Here's the second one and the third one. So basically in this chain space we made 1 cluster, 2 chains, and then 1 cluster. Now we make chain 1. Now we are going to make into the next hole or this chain space the same thing as we made here. So we'll make 3 double crochets, 2 chains, and 3 double crochets. So yarn over, insert your hook, pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, make the second double crochet, pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, insert your hook, and make your third double crochet. So here's our first cluster. Now we make 2 chain stitches, 1, 2, and then yarn over and make 3 double crochets, pull through 2, pull through 2, okay, so here we made 3 double crochets, chain 2 and 3 double crochets. After that we are making chain 1. Now we're moving on to the next corner. We're going to make 3 double crochets, chain 2 and 3 double crochets in the same loop. Yarn over, insert your hook, and then pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, insert your hook, make our second double crochet, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. Okay, we made our first cluster, chain 2, and then in the same hole we're going to make our second cluster, i.e. 3 double crochets. So basically we finished 3 corners of our granny square, and in each of these corners we made 3 double crochets, chain 2 and 3 double crochets. In our first corner we made only 1 cluster. Now we're going to finish this corner. So after making 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets, I'm making chain 1 and then yarn over and insert your hook in this hole and make 3 double crochets. Here's my first one, pull through 2, pull through 2, and then insert your hook, pull through 2, pull through 2. So here's our cluster. After that, chain 2, 1, 2, and then make a slip stitch with the first double crochet of this first cluster. Here it is. You can see the little V here. And then take your yarn and pull through 2. Then chain 1 and cut your yarn. Here's our finished second row of our granny square. So I wanted to show you our progress and where we're at and compare it with our finished granny square. So we finished our second row and here it is on our finished granny. And now we're going to start crocheting our third row using the white yarn. We're going to start in this corner. The reason why we're starting in this corner is because we are avoiding the swirling effect of the granny square. So we're avoiding this corner. To start my third row, I'm taking my white yarn and here's my short tail, and I'm making a cross and making my slip knot. Now I'm going to yarn over and hold it with my index finger. We're going to start in this corner, so I'm inserting my hook, take out my yarn and pull through 2 loops and then pull through 2. And now I'm going to make 2 double crochets in the same corner. Here's my second double crochet and I'm making my third one. So here's our first cluster. Now I'm making chain 1 and here we are at the next space. We are going to make 3 double crochets or 1 cluster. Here are my 3 double crochet, and after that I'm making chain 1, and we are moving on to the next corner. Here we are going to make 3 double crochets, 2 chains and 3 double crochets. So we're making the same thing as we made in the previous row. Here you can see our 3 double crochets, 2 chains and 3 double crochets. Now we are making the same thing in each corner. Here's my first double crochet, second, and my third double crochets. Now I'm making chain 2, and in the same loop, here's our loop, we are making 3 double crochets, and we always pull through 2. So here's our finished corner. Now we make chain 1. Now we are moving on to the next chain space. Here we are making 1 cluster or 3 double crochets. The short tail I'm holding on the back, and I'm crocheting and hiding the end while working my granny square. So now after 3 double crochets we are making 1 chain. I'm moving on to my next corner, and I'm going to make 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets into the same space. Here's my first double crochet, second, here are my 3 double crochets. I'm making 2 chain stitches and then yarn over, and I'm making 3 double crochets. So we finished our next corner. Next make chain 1, and in this chain space make 3 double crochets. So here's how our third row should look like. We started off with 1 cluster, and then we made chain 1, and in these spaces which are not the corners we made 3 double crochets. After that we always made chain 1, and in the corners we are always making 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets. So now after making 3 double crochets in this chain space, continue making chain 1, and into this corner make 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets. After that make chain 1, and into this chain space make 3 double crochets, and then I'll meet you in the end of this corner. So here's my progress at this moment. I made in each of the corners 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets, and then made chain 1, and on the sides of my squares I made 3 double crochets. Here's my last side when I finished my 3 double crochets, and now we're going to continue working together. Here's my 3 double crochet stitches. Now I'm making chain 1, and now we're moving on to our final corner of our third row, and I'm going to make 3 double crochet stitches. Here is my cluster, and now I'm going to make chain 2, and then we have to find in our first cluster of our third row our first double crochet. Here it is. You can see the little V here, and we have to insert our hook and make slip stitch to finish the row. So we are pulling through 2. And now we make chain 1 and cut off your yarn. I usually like to leave a little space like this and take off your hook, and here's our finished third row. So to start off your fourth row, take your black yarn, in my case I'm taking my gray yarn for demonstration purposes, and make a slip knot. and then I'm going to yarn over and hold it with my index finger. We are going to start making our fourth row in this corner. So insert your hook, take out your yarn and pull through 2, and then pull through 2. So here we made our first double crochet, and then make into the same corner 2 more double crochets. Here's my second one, and here's my third one. So we are always starting off our rows with one cluster in the corner. Now I'm making chain 1, and here's my next chain space. We're going to make 3 double crochets in this chain space. After 3 double crochets, make chain 1, and then into the next chain space make 3 double crochets. Then make chain 1, and now we're at the next corner of our granny square. We're going to make 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets. So yarn over and make your first cluster or 3 double crochets, and then make 2 chains, and in the same corner or in the same loop make the next cluster or 3 double crochets. Now we're going to make chain 1, and onto the next 2 chain spaces we are going to make 1 cluster in each of these spaces, and between each of them we're going to make chain 1. So yarn over and we're going to make 1 cluster in each of these spaces. Here's my 3 double crochets. Now I'm making chain 1, and into the next chain space I'm making my next cluster. And then we're making chain 1, and here's our next corner. We are going to make 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets, as we always do in our corners. So you can see we always make in the corners same thing: 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets. And the only thing that changes in each of the rows are the numbers of clusters that we are making on the sides. So in our fourth row we are making 2 clusters, and then we're making in the corners these 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets. So basically we're making 1 cluster in each of these spaces and making 1 chain stitches between all them, and into the corners we are making 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets, like here. So continue working your row, making 1 cluster in each of these chain spaces, and don't forget to make chain 1 between of them, and then in the corner make 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets, and here continue making 1 cluster each, and I'll meet you at the end of this row. So here I am at the end of my fourth row. As you can see, our fourth row consists of 2 clusters on each sides, and on the corners we always make 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets. So here on my last side I made chain 1, 1 cluster, chain 1 and cluster, and now we're going to continue working this row together. So here's my cluster. Now I'm making chain 1 and then yarn over, and I'm going to make into this next loop 3 double crochets. and then make 2 chain stitches as usual in our corners. And now find your first double crochet stitch, here it is, and insert your hook, and then make a slip stitch to finish the row. And then make chain 1 and cut off your yarn. And here's our finished 4th row of our granny square. We are going to work our final 5th row using the black yarn. In my case it's the gray yarn, and I'm making a slip knot. Then yarn over and hold it with your index finger. We are going to start making 3 double crochets in this corner. So insert your hook, take out your yarn and pull through 2, and then pull through 2. Here's our first double crochet stitch. Now yarn over and make into the same loop 2 more double crochet stitches. And then chain 1. Then yarn over and make into the next space 3 double crochets. After 3 double crochets, make 1 chain, and then into the next chain space right here we're going to make 1 cluster or 3 double crochets. And then chain 1, and into the next chain space make 3 double crochets. Now make chain 1, and here we are at our next corner, and we are going to make as usual 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets. So yarn over and make into this corner your first cluster. So here's my first cluster in the corner. Now make 2 chain stitches, and I'm going to work my 3 double crochets into the same loop. Here's our finished corner. Now make chain 1 and crochet into the next chain spaces 1 cluster. The little tail here, I'm going to hide it like this, and I'm going to hold it with my finger. So yarn over and make 3 double crochets. Now make chain 1, and moving on to the next chain space right here we're going to make 3 double crochets. So now you can see that it's quite repetitive, and we are just making 3 double crochets and then chain 1 until we get into the corners. So here's my next space. I'm going to make 3 double crochets. So here we are at the next corner, and we are going to make 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets into the same hole right here. So yarn over and make your first cluster. Here I made it, and then I'm making 2 chain stitches, and into the same corner I'm making my second cluster. Now make chain 1. So here's how our work should look like right now. The pattern of our 5th row is basically we are always making on the sides of our squares 3 clusters, and between each of them we are making 1 chain stitch, and only in the corner we are making as usual 3 double crochets, 2 chains and 3 double crochets. So now continue working after your corner, making 3 clusters in each of these spaces, and don't forget to make 1 chain between each of them, and in the corner always make 3 double crochets and 2 chains, then 3 double crochets into the same space, and continue working right here, making 3 clusters into each of this space, and I'll meet you at the end of this corner. Here I am at the end of my row. I made 3 clusters and made a chain 1 between each of them, and now we're going to finish this row together. So after making this cluster, I made chain 1 right here and then yarn over, and we're going to make 3 double crochets in our final corner. Here's my first double crochet. Now I'm making my second one. I'm pulling it out so that I can separate each of the clusters. Here's my cluster. Now I'm making 2 chain stitches as usual on the corner, and now we're going to make a slip stitch with the first double crochet stitch. So insert your hook and then pull through 2, and then chain 1 and cut off your yarn. And here's our finished granny square, and this is how it looks on the back side. Don't forget to weave in those ends. I usually prefer using the darning needle. Okay, so now that you've made your first granny square of your project, here's my demo, and here's my original one with the black yarn. Overall, we'll have to make 4 of these granny squares. And then for our project, we'll need to make this type of granny square with the white center. And it's basically the same as this one, just feel free to rewatch the video and start off with making the white center. So for our balaclava, we'll need 4 of these granny squares with the white center and 4 of these granny squares with the black center. And now we're going to join all of them together using our magic wand. Crochet hook. Now that you've made your 8 granny squares, put them wrong side up, following the scheme on the screen. And then we're going to start joining all of our squares, starting from this point, and then we'll stop right here. I'm going to join all of my squares using 1 strand of yarn instead of 2. So start off with making a slip knot. Now take it out from your hook, and here's our starting point. Then take your 2 granny squares when the right sides facing each other, and now in the corner we can see 3 double crochets, 2 chain stitches and 3 double crochets. We need to insert our hook into the first chain stitch that comes after this cluster. Here it is. So I'm inserting my hook, and here's my little V here, and then I'm going to find my chain stitch that comes right after this cluster, right here. So now that I have 2 stitches on my hook, I'm putting my loop right here, and then I'm going to pull through all of them. Now make chain 1. After that, we're going to insert our hook into the same loop and make a slip stitch. Here I've inserted my hook, and then take your yarn and pull through all of them. Now we can see our first cluster, and here's our first double crochet. Insert your hook into that stitch and then find your first double crochet in this square also. Here's the first cluster and here's the first double crochet. So we have 2 stitches on our hook and make a slip stitch. Now just continue repeating. Here's our second double crochet. Insert your hook into the second double crochet of both of your squares and make a slip stitch. And here's our third double crochet stitch. I'm also making a slip stitch through all of them. So now that we've joined our 3 double crochets all together, we can see here's our chain stitch. We're going to insert our hook into the stitch and then find the same chain stitch in the other granny square. Here it is. And we'll also make a slip stitch. Now we're going to continue joining by making slip stitches these 3 double crochets. So insert your hook into the first stitch and then find the first double crochet in the other granny squares and then make a slip stitch. So here's my second double crochet stitch. I'm just making slip stitches. Make sure that here's my third, and I have to find the third one on the other granny square also. And then here's our joined second cluster. Now continue joining by making slip stitches. Here's my chain stitch. I'm inserting into the stitch and then I'm finding the same stitch in the other square and then make a slip stitch. So by now I think you can see that we're just making a row of slip stitches, but make sure to see that the second double crochet you are joining with the second double crochet in the other square, and the third with the third one, and the chain stitch with the chain stitch. So now continue making slip stitches from this point and I'll meet you right here. Here's how our progress is looking like right now. I'm at my final cluster, here's the corner, and I'm going to join my last third double crochets of both squares by making a slip stitch. And here's our corner. I'm going to insert my hook into the first chain stitch right here. And then I'll find this chain stitch that goes after the cluster on the other square and then make a slip stitch. So now we finished joining our 2 squares together. And now we're going to start to join our other 2 squares. So take them right here and you can see the corner. So here's my 3 double crochets, and after that the first chain stitch that comes after this cluster, I'm going to insert my hook right there. And then here I'll find the same stitch. Here's my 3 double crochets and here's my first chain stitches. Now that we have our 2 chain stitches on our hook, make your slip stitch. Now we're going to continue making slip stitches, and here's our first cluster of the corner. Insert your hook into the first double crochets of both squares and make a slip stitch. And then here's my second double crochet stitch of both squares and continue making slip stitches. Don't forget to insert into the chain stitch, not the chain space, right here. And also make slip stitch. So just make sure to watch carefully and join first double crochet with the first double crochet of both squares, and the second one with the second one, third one with the third one, and chain stitch with the chain stitch. So here's how my progress looks like so far. From this point, continue joining your second pair of granny squares using slip stitches, and stop right here where I will meet you and we'll join our third pair of granny squares. So I stopped at this point and wanted to show you how my progress is looking so far, and just kind of walk you through what I'm about to do next. I'm going to join two of these clusters by making slip stitches, and in the corner I'm going to join the first chain stitch that comes after the cluster, and then we'll continue joining our third pair of our granny squares. So here I'm joining my last third double crochet stitch, and I'm just making a slip stitch as usual. Here's my knot, and now I'm going to find my first chain stitch right here, and the same thing on the other square. Now I'm making a slip stitch, so pull through all of them. Now take your third pair of granny squares, we'll insert our hook into our first chain stitch that comes after the cluster. Here it is, and now I'm going to find the chain stitch that comes after the cluster right here, and then take my yarn and pull through all of them. And now just continue inserting your hook into your first double crochet stitch and make a slip stitch. And now the second, and then the third stitch of both squares. And here's the chain stitch. Don't forget to insert your hook into the stitch, not into the chain space, and also make a slip stitch. And here's our next cluster. Just join your first double crochet of your first square with your first double crochet of your second square, and so on. The second one with the second one, and the third with the third. From this point, continue making slip stitches and join your squares, and I'll meet you right here when we'll continue joining this part. Okay, so here's my progress so far. Now we're going to finish joining these two squares together and then turn and continue joining this part. So here's my corner, and I've joined these 3 double crochets all together right here, and now I'm going to insert my hook into the first chain stitch that comes after the cluster and make a slip stitch. So here we finished joining these 2 squares together. Now take your next granny square, and we're going to join 2 of these together. Here are the right sides facing each other, as always. Now in the corner we can see the first chain stitch that comes after the cluster. We're inserting our hook right into that stitch, and find the same chain stitch that comes after this cluster, and then make a slip stitch. Now continue making slip stitches in the first double crochet of both squares, and then the second one, and then in the third one, and of course into the chain stitch. So here's how our joining looks like so far. Now continue making slip stitches from this point, and I'll meet you at the end of the row. So here I am at the end of the row, and I'm going to insert my hook into the third double crochet stitch and join it using the slip stitch. And here's my corner. So insert your hook into the first chain stitch that comes after the cluster, and the same thing on the other square, and make your final slip stitch, and then make chain 1 and cut off your yarn. Take it out. So to recap, we started joining from this point, and then we stopped right here, and now we're going to start joining from this point, and then we're going to stop at this point. So I've decided to turn my work this way. Here's our row with 4 squares, and here's our starting point. And we're going to start off with making a slip knot. And then take it out. And here in the corner we can see 3 double crochets, 2 chains, 3 double crochets. And we're going to insert our hook into the first chain stitch that comes after this cluster, right here. And I'm going to find the same first chain stitch that comes after this cluster. Here are my little V's on my hook, and then I'm taking my slip knot and pulling through all of them. After that, I'm going to make chain 1, and then insert your hook into the same stitch right here, and then make a slip stitch. Now we're going to continue making slip stitches. Here's our first double crochet stitch, and then I'm going to find first double crochet stitch in the other square, and then I'm joining all of them together with my slip stitch. And here's my second double crochet. So just continue joining your squares by making slip stitches. And here's our chain stitch. We're going to insert our hook into the stitch as I showed you before, and then making also slip stitches. And here's our next cluster. I'm also making just slip stitches. From this point, continue working your slip stitches, and I'll meet you right here. So here's how my joining progress looks like right now, and now I'm going to join my last clusters all together. Here's the second double crochet stitch. I'm going to join all of them by making my slip stitch, and here's the third double crochet stitch of the cluster. And now we're going to join these first chain stitches of both squares that come after the cluster. Here's the first, right here, and then I'm going to find the chain stitch of the other square. Here it is. Pull through all of them, and now I've finished joining these 2 squares together. Now we're going to move forward to next squares. Here they are. And then find first chain stitch that comes after this cluster. Here's the corner. And then just insert your hook. and then find the first chain stitch on the other square right here. Take your yarn and pull through all of them. Now we can see our next cluster, and we're going to join all of them with our slip stitches. So from this point, it's just very familiar, we're just joining and working our slip stitches all the way through. So from this point, continue working your slip stitches, and I'll meet you right here where we'll turn and continue working towards this way. So here's where I am right now. I've joined last clusters of these 2 granny squares right here, and now after joining these 3 double crochets, I'm going to join the first chain stitch that comes after the cluster. Here's the first one, and then I'm going to find the first chain stitch of the other square, and then make a slip stitch. Now I'm going to take my next square and join these 2 together. In the corner we can see 3 double crochets, 2 chains, 3 double crochets, and I'm going to insert my hook into the first chain that comes after this cluster. So right here. And then I'm going to find the first chain stitch that comes after this cluster, also in the corner, right here. And then I'm taking my yarn and pull through all of them, making slip stitch. And then we're going to join the first cluster. Here it is, my first double crochet stitch, and just continue working slip stitches that I've shown you before. So here's how our joining should look like. We finished this corner right here, and then we turned, and now we're going to continue working slip stitches all the way through here. So I've worked my slip stitches to this point, and now we're going to finish this corner and then turn and start joining these 2 squares together. So here's my last cluster, and I'm joining these 2 double crochets together, and then here's my third double crochets, and now in the corner I'm going to join the first chain stitch that comes after the cluster, and then make a slip stitch right here. Now take this square and we're going to start joining these 2 granny squares. So in the corner we can see 3 double crochets and then first chain stitch. We're going to insert our hook into that stitch and then find right here 3 double crochets, and here's the first chain stitch, and also insert our hook right into there, and then take our yarn and make a slip stitch. Now we can see our first cluster, and we're going to join by making slip stitches, joining first double crochet stitches of both squares and then the second double crochet stitch, and so on, just making our slip stitches. From this point, continue working your slip stitches, joining these 2 squares all together, and then after joining the last clusters, make final slip stitch with the first chain stitches that comes after the cluster, and then start joining these 2 squares together by inserting your hook into the first chain stitch that comes after this cluster, and same with this square, the first chain stitch that comes after this cluster. If you ever feel confused while joining this part, feel free to rewatch the video where we joined this part. It's basically the same. So just continue working your slip stitches all the way through, and I'll meet you at the end of the row. So here I am at the end of the row, and here's my last cluster at the end of the row, and I'm joining my third double crochet stitch right here, and then I'm joining the first chain stitch that comes after the cluster, and the same thing on the other square, and make a slip stitch. And now I'm making chain 1 and cutting off my yarn. From this point we're going to start joining these two granny squares together, and then after that we're gonna do the same thing with these two granny squares, and then the final join is gonna be between this granny square and this one. Now I'm going to start joining these two granny squares together, and I'm going to start off with making a slip knot, and then take it out. And I'm going to fold my two granny squares together so that the right sides are facing in front of each other. And I'm going to start from this point right here. Here's our corner, and we're going to insert our hook into the first chain stitch that comes after this cluster. And the same thing on this square. Here's my first chain stitch. And then I'm taking my slip knot and pull through everything. After that I'm making chain 1, and into the same loop I'm going to make a slip stitch. So here's my first slip stitch, and then I'm going to join by making slip stitches, and here's my first cluster. And just insert your hook as usual into the first double crochet in both squares, and then the second one, and then into the third one. Just joining all of them by making slip stitches. And here's my chain stitch. I'm also joining the stitches, not the spaces. Here's how our join looks like. From this point continue working your slip stitches, and I'll meet you right here. Here I am at the end of my row. I've worked my slip stitches all the way through, and I'm going to join my last cluster. I'm just inserting my hook into the third double crochet stitch of both square, and here's the first chain stitch that comes after the cluster. Just insert your hook into the first chain, and then find the first chain of the other square. So here are my both loops. I'm gonna pull through both of them. Now I'm going to insert my hook into this stitch, and then make a slip stitch, and then I'm going to make chain 1, and then just cut off my yarn, take it out. And here's our joined two granny squares. Now that we've joined these two granny squares together, make the same thing with these two granny squares. Just start off with this corner and insert your hook into the first chain stitch that comes after this cluster, and the same thing on the other square, and start making slip stitches from this point to this. And don't forget to make the last slip stitch into this stitch right here. Now that we've joined these two granny squares together, make the same thing on the other side. Just fold these two granny squares right side facing in front of each other, and you're going to start from this corner right here. Just insert your hook as usual into the first chain stitch that comes after this cluster, and just work your slip stitches all the way through until here, and then make a slip stitch with this stitch right here, and then make chain 1 and cut off your yarn. Here's how our project looks like right now. And now we're going to move on to join the last two granny squares together. Here they are. And you're going to start off with making a slip knot, and you can either start from this point or this, it doesn't really matter. Just insert your hook into the first chain stitch that comes after this cluster, and then start working your slip stitches all the way through until the end of the row. And then in the end of the row, just make a slip stitch joining this first chain stitch that comes after this cluster, and then the same thing on this square also. And after that, make a chain 1 and then cut off your yarn. Now that we've joined our granny squares together, here's how our work should look like right now. And from this point we are going to turn inside out. So that the right side is facing in front of us, and then we're going to start making a border. For borders, I'm going to start off with making a slip knot, and I'm using 2 strands of white yarn. And then take it out. So we can start at any point that we want, and I'm going to start from this corner right here. Here's my 3 double crochets, and I'm going to insert my hook into the first double crochet right here. And I'm taking my slip knot and pull through this loop. Taking my yarn and making 1 chain, and then into the same loop I'm going to make single crochet. So now we have 2 loops on our hook, and we're going to pull through 2. This short tail I'm going to hold behind my work and work through it. So here's my second double crochet. I'm going to make single crochet also. I have 2 loops on my hook, and then just pull through 2 of them. And just continue making single crochets. And here's my first chain stitch. I'm going to insert my hook into the stitch and make my single crochet. Just pull through 2. And here's my short tail. Now just continue working your single crochets. Here's my next cluster, and I'm just making a row of single crochets. So just pulling through 2. So here's how our border should look like. From this point, continue working your single crochets until this point, and I'll meet you right here. I'm getting closer to my corner right here, and I'm just going to finish making my single crochets. So I finished my cluster, and here's my first chain stitch. I'm going to make 1 single crochet. And then we're going to insert our hook into this space and make a single crochet. So now I have 2 loops on my hook, and just pull through both. And now we're going to move on to next square. Here's the first chain stitch. I'm going to make my first single crochet into that stitch. And after this single crochet, here's our 3 double crochet stitches. Just make single crochets into every stitch and just pull through both loops. Here's my first chain stitch. I'm also inserting my hook into the stitch, not into the space, and just pull through 2. And just continue working your border, making single crochets in every stitch. So from this point, continue working your single crochets, and I'll meet you right here. So I've worked my single crochets until this point, and I'm going to insert my hook into this chain stitch and make a single crochet. Now I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into this sewing stitch right here. And then take my yarn, and then I'm gonna have 3 loops on my hook, and I'm going to pull through all 3 of them. So here we've made our half double crochet stitch. And then moving on to the next square, we can see the first chain stitch that comes after this cluster. We're going to insert our hook and make our single crochet stitch. And then now here's our cluster. Just insert your hook and make single crochet in each of the stitch. So just pull through both loops right here, and then here's our chain stitch. Just insert your hook into the stitch. I'm hiding this short tail behind my work so that I won't have to weave in later, and just continue working my single crochets. And here's how our border looks like. The reason why I've made half double crochet into this space is because I wanted to make the border looking more flat. From now on, continue working your single crochets and I'll meet you right here. But don't forget to make your half double crochet into the stitch. So here I am, I've worked my single crochets until this point, and here's my last 3 double crochets. I've made single crochets into each of those stitches, and here's my chain stitch. I'm going to work my single crochet into that chain stitch. And then I'm going to insert my hook into this space right here and make 1 single crochet. After that, I'm going to find in this square the first chain stitch right here, and I'm going to insert my hook and make 1 single crochet. Now we can see our first single crochet stitch right here, and I'm going to insert my hook into this little V right here and make a slip stitch. And then I'm making chain 1 and just cutting off my yarn. And here's our finished border. And now we're going to make a border for this part. And just start off with making a slip knot as usual, and then we're going to just make single crochets. Right here is my slip knot. I'm gonna take it out, and now just put your hook into any stitch that you want. I'm gonna choose this stitch so that it's white and you can see it on the screen, and I'm taking my slip knot and pull through this loop, and then I'm making chain 1, and then into the same loop make first single crochet. From this point just continue working your single crochets. Here's my first cluster, and I'm just making in each of the stitch 1 single crochet. And here's my chain stitch. I'm also making 1 single crochet into that stitch. And here's my next cluster. I'm just inserting my hook and working my single crochets. So just insert your hook and take it out and pull through 2. So from this point, continue working your single crochet into every stitch of the row, and for the exception is this point where we're connecting 2 granny squares. Here make half double crochets, and don't forget to see, here's the loop. Just insert your hook like this and make half double crochet into the stitch, and then just continue working your single crochets right here and make here half double crochets, and then I'll meet you in the end of this row. So here I am at the end of my row, and here's my border. I finished making single crochets into the last cluster right here, and now I'm going to make single crochet into this chain stitch. And then yarn over, and now I'm going to insert my hook into this stitch right here. Take out my yarn and make my half double crochet stitch. And then we're moving on to our next square right here, and just insert your hook into the chain stitch and make a single crochet. And now we can find our first little V right here. This is our first single crochet stitch, and insert your hook into that stitch and make a slip stitch with it. And now chain 1 and cut off your yarn. Now just weave in all of your ends using darning needle and your balaclava is done.